Welcome back. Today we're talking about another gift for Christmas. I've got a few blanks made already, but I'm going to show you how I made some of these. And we're going to be doing some coasters. I've got a whole bunch of different species of wood over here. I put these together just to test that my patterns seem to look really good. Tonight I'm going to get a couple of the blanks cut up and glued up into panels, and I'll get that into my panel clamps so that when I'm done with work tomorrow, I can come straight back out and I can start doing my planing, my sanding, and prepping them for actually cutting the coasters. So let's go take a look at the woods real quick. Let's just take a quick peek at what we've got here. Looks like I've got some nice ambrosia maple with some wormholes in it. I've got some plain alder. This looks maybe like some rosewood. I don't believe that's mahogany. I think it's just rosewood. Here's some maple, which is going to go good with all the dark woods. I've got this board and a few more of purple heart. I've actually got quite a stock of purple heart right now. Here's some regular, ordinary walnut. Here is a very highly figured walnut, and also some highly figured cherry. I've got, let's see, how do you pronounce that? Guanacoste? Guanacoste we're going to go with. And that looks really pretty. I've never used this before. I've never used a lot of these woods before. This is Serrari rosewood. So it looks a lot different than this. So this might be something else. Here's just some leftover cherry scraps I can use up. And then last is this zebra wood. And if I find anything else in my shop, I might throw that in too. But this is what I'm using to make some coasters for now. You can see these blanks that I made up are just walnut with a little stripe of purple heart down the middle, sandwiched in between a couple pieces of maple, which really contrasts the three woods together. If you put the purple heart right next to the walnut, it wouldn't pop out as much. So these are going to be for coasters, and we're going to make blanks out of the rest of these, or at least several blanks. I don't know how much of this wood I'm going to use. So I have an idea for one of the trivets to be some of this zebra wood. So I'm going to take this and cut it down to, let's see what I'm working with here, about 17 or 18 inches. This gives me enough room to have about 4 of my 4-inch trivets on here, and I'm planning on making them circles. So I can even offset them if my stock is a little small. But I'm gonna grab a piece of this that's the same size as this. I'm not gonna show you all of the cutting, but I'll show you the patterns I come up with at the end, and then that's gonna give you an idea of things that you can try that might work. Okay, so I have cut it down to length. I put a flat side on one side, flipped it over, and made a parallel side on the other. So we've basically got our blank ready. Now this is only 3 3/4 inches wide. I want my coasters to be about 4 inches. So in adding wood to this, I'm going to want to add at least 1 inch to 1.5 inches to make sure that I have room. So let me go find something to pair with this, and I'll mail it up as well. Okay, so what I found was this paddock, or paddock. I've heard it pronounced both ways. I really like these two colors together. So I want to preserve a lot of this striping. Otherwise, why use zebra wood at all? But what I need to do is widen this board, and I'm going to use this paddock to do that. So we're going to cut at least 1 or 2 pieces from this paddock, and we're going to cut the zebra wood a little bit to put those pieces in between here to break up the pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and mill up this paddock real quick. You're going to see the color that the paddock is going to eventually take on. So that's going to be a really pretty color. with this neutral zebra wood tone. So now we need to cut up these two pieces and make a blank that's at least 4.5 to 5 inches wide. And this is where you can be creative. Okay, so there's our paddock pieces. We can sandwich these in here. And that'll be a neat pattern. And then I had this extra piece, and this looks like maybe 1/4 inch or 3/8, and that'll be nice as an accent for some of the other ones possibly. So we're definitely going to keep this until this project's over. But I'm going to go ahead and do a couple more of these cut-ups to make sure that we have some blanks to glue together, and then I'll meet you at the end when I have a bunch of them to put on the clamps. Now we have 3 more blanks cut. This is the first blank. This is zebra wood with paddock. And I'm just trying for a very simple 2-stripe pattern here. And then we're going to do, this is just hard maple and paddock. I had a big hunk of paddock, so I'm using it in a lot of stuff. There we go. And this, I wanted to try something where we had some stripes that were equidistant, so I just have 2 3/4 inch slices and then 2 pieces on the outside. We'll cut that up, and then once that's cut up, we'll take a look and see how we want to draw our coasters on there. There we go. I kind of want to keep that grain how it's supposed to be. There we go. So that's what we're going to do with that block. And then this block, we've got some more paddock, and this is ambrosia maple. We've got these pieces that are a little smaller than 1/4 inch. We're going to use those as an accent for these coasters. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my clamps, and we're going to get these glued up. Okay, we've got my clamps set up, and I've got all of my blanks in here the way I want them. I want to make sure not to put glue between these 2 pieces. I want to make sure not to put glue in between these 2 pieces. The first thing we're going to need is my favorite flavor of glue. So I'm going to go ahead and take this, and we're going to set these up and glue them in, and then we're going to tighten them down with these clamps. Okay, I'm going to make sure that those are separated and not glued. Then I'm going to line these up as much as I can to reduce waste. Especially that one in there is off. There we go. Now you'd usually want to put pressure down on these and up as well to stop them from cupping. I'm not going to put an awful lot of pressure on these, so it shouldn't matter. And also these are going to be processed. These are going to be processed quite a bit after this. This is definitely not the last step for these. They're going to have to be flattened, sanded, shaped. So shouldn't be necessary in this situation. little bit of pressure on both sides. Make sure that the ends are closed up properly. Looks like everything else is good. We'll take a look from below. Yep, that is definitely a mess, but we'll clean that up when we're ready to process these. So I'm going to let these dry overnight. That way tomorrow when we get back to them, we'll be able to immediately start planing them down, sanding them, resawing them, and cutting them out on the bandsaw. Okay, it's the next day. These are definitely glued up well, so I'm going to pull these out of the clamps. We're going to clean them up a little bit with a paint scraper, and then we're going to start processing them through the planer and everything else. The next thing we want to do is resaw these boards in half, so we'll get twice as many coasters out of each blank. I've set up my bandsaw for resawing. I've put a nice wide blade in here that should keep track, and I've marked the centers of my board on the side here, and I've lined that up with my blade as well as I could so that I get two equal pieces coming off of here. Now I'm going to carefully resaw this board into two pieces. There, that's our board resawed into two pieces, very close in width here, so we're going to be able to take care of that on the drum sander along with the other couple of blanks, which I'm going to go cut those now. Okay, on to the next step. We need to take care of these saw marks on the insides. Thankfully I haven't put away my drum sander, so we're just going to send these through on this side only, the internal side, because the outside is still nice and smooth from this earlier. And we'll get all the insides nice and sanded down to, I think there's a 120 sandpaper in this. And then we'll have to do some hand sanding still, but this will cut a lot of our sanding in half. Alright, we got our coaster blanks done here. I'm going to go over them a little bit more with some sandpaper. Use the random orbit sander with some 120. And then I'm going to go up to, I might go as high as 220. It's going to be way easier to sand these boards than it will be to sand the faces of the coasters later. And even though I'm going to sand the coasters a little bit, this will make that job a heck of a lot easier. So I'm going to put in my earbuds and listen to Christmas music, at this phase, I don't want to remove a lot of material. I'm just trying to get rid of all the scratches that were put in here by the drum sander. So you'll see me do this a lot. If you're new to woodworking, all I'm going to be doing is putting some light pencil marks on here and then sanding just enough to get rid of those pencil marks. And that's going to mean that I'm done with that pass. And I'll flip it over and I'll go through all of my pieces just like that. So I went over both sides of this with the 220. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use a little bit of mineral spirits to raise the grain and clean off the board a little bit. Gives us a peek of what the boards are going to look like, what the final coasters are going to look like. Boy, that zebra wood is popping. That's really nice. I didn't like this pattern at first. I think this was now one of my favorites. So once that dries, the grain will be raised a little bit. We'll be able to sand that back down to smooth with the 220, and then we'll go on to the next step. We're ready to start cutting the blanks into actual coasters. So I have my circle jig that I made for my bandsaw here. Gonna move my fence out of the way. Line that up to the blade. And so that's my circle jig. Here's my pin. Now this is marked at 4 inches, which is where I want my coasters to be. I want them to be 4-inch coasters. So at this point it's pretty easy. We're going to take one of our blanks, put the wheel on here, the pattern, and kind of figure out where we want the coaster to be, what we want included in it, and then we're going to double-sided tape this down, put our pin in. We're going to put it on here, slide it into the blade, and cut our coaster. You'll see that here in just a minute. These aren't finished, but these are the blanks I made yesterday. So I want to do something very similar today. I want them all to be very similar, so that looks about right. Just simply draw around it there. I'm going to stick it down here right where I drew the circle. There you go, so you can see I put it right where I drew my circle. So that's going to hold on to the coaster as we cut it. Let me pull the pin out for now. I'm going to cut a chunk of this off to make it easier to send through. Now I'm just going to put this pin in here, back it off from the blade, put our template on there. Then I'm going to push it into the blade, keeping this still, and then we'll rotate it around. Okay, so then we just make sure our blade comes to a stop, pull it up off. I'm just going to use an a box cutter. Peel that right off there. That's our perfect circle. Now on my circle cutting jig, it always gives me a little bit of a notch where I started, so I usually clean that up on my drum sander really quick, and then this goes on to the next step. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this for the rest of this blank and go through the other blanks as well. Just keep in mind when you're doing your blanks that you're going to have the opportunity to choose more of what the pattern looks like. So for example, this one, I probably want those 3 strips centered. However, this one, I think I'm going to do closer to this where it's kind of off to the side. So after we get done with this, we're going to have a whole bunch of little coaster blanks just like this, and those will go on to the next step. Well, we got all of our little coaster pucks ready. So now we need to put an edge on these coaster pucks. I like a nice chamfer, so I'm going to put a 45-degree chamfer on the top and bottom, and that'll act to clean up all these edges as well. We'll probably have to come by and sand them also, but this is a good way to clean up those edges. You can see I already have my 45-degree chamfer bit in here. This is just a peg that helps me guide the coasters as they're going through. This will give me a little more stability. This is kind of like having a fence when having a fence is not the best idea. So I'm going to go ahead and put on my hearing protection, get the dust extractor going, and we're going to go through all these little pucks and get them edged out. Okay, so the next step, since we've cut those edges, we're going to have to sand along them. So I'm just going to go around every one of my discs. I'm going to sand the flat here, and then the 2 chamfers, making sure not to sand over the edges. I don't want a rounded edge. I want a nice 45-degree chamfer on each side. I'm going to go ahead through the entire stock. There's no special trick here that I know of. If you know it, let me know. But I'm just going to go ahead and do that sanding, and then I'll bring you back whenever I'm ready to go into the next part. Got them all sanded up again. The last thing we're going to do tonight is add a sealer. I'm going to use some Danish oil for that tonight. To apply it, I like to get a pair of vinyl gloves, and I'm just going to do this nice easy wipe on Watco Danish oil. I wish I had natural at the moment, but right now I just have medium walnut. So we're just gonna wipe that right on the coaster. Get all the sides. I'm going to go ahead and do that to all my coasters. So they've had a few days to dry after I put the Watco Danish oil on there, and that's sealed the outside. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spend some time putting some wipe-on poly on these. I prefer lacquer, but if I put lacquer on these and my friends decide to drink alcohol on them, it'll get rid of the finish quite quickly. So the best thing to really do is go with no finish or something like maybe poly. So we're going to go ahead and put wipe-on polyurethane on these. So I'm just going to go ahead and put on a pair of vinyl gloves to keep this off my hands. And I've got a little container of it out here. And this is really simple to apply. I'm just going to get some on my cloth, wipe it right on. And that's good. So we're going to go ahead and go through every one of these. I'm going to leave this dry along with the other ones for a few hours. Then we're going to come back, hit each with a little bit of sandpaper if it's necessary, and put one more coat on them. Christmas is almost here, and I just finished my coasters. These are going to go well with the beers and drinks that I'm giving my friends, and they'll have something to use them with. I'm glad you came along. I think we had some fun. There's some other finishes we could have used. I really like using lacquer, but if I'm going to give away beer or alcohol with these, it's kind of hard to drink alcohol and not ruin a lacquer finish. So I went with just wipe on poly with these, which turned out okay. I was going to do a wax polish on these at the end with my bio buffing system. If you'd like to see that in the future, I could show you how to do that. Well, I still got to package these up. I'm thinking of just wrapping them with some twine or something like that, something rustic looking to match what they look like. And these are going to go to my friends at the holiday party tomorrow. I'll see you guys later. Thanks for joining me. Come back for the next one.